Alright, hi everybody. I'm super excited today because instead of reading off my phone, I finally have my copy of the book. So this is the cover, and you can see that we have our title up here, Seedfolks, and then here's our author, Paul Fleischman, and then here's our cover image. So I did just want to show y'all a little bit in our book since I have it. Hopefully you can see. There are lots more books by him, so that's one thing. And then also, I guess it doesn't have our chapters in here, but this is our first page. So remember how we started out with Kim and how she planted just those 3 little seeds, and then they grew and they started all this? Well, that was page 1, and now today we are starting on page 29. So I will tell you at the end kind of how many pages total there are, but just look how far we've gotten in such a short amount of time. So even if you're just reading a short book, you really can make a lot of progress in such a short amount of time. I'm only doing one chapter between 4 minutes and 8 minutes of reading every day, every other day, and we read a whole book in less than a month. So I really want y'all to think, well, we will have read. We haven't finished it yet. But I just want you all to think about how much you can do if you just take little chunks and really focus on getting something done. So I want to focus on that accomplishment that we're halfway through pretty much, and I'm really excited to have the book. So let's get started. Our character today is Virgil. And this is who we have. My father, he always has a smile on his face and a plan moving in his head. We were standing together on the sidewalk while the men were clearing the lot. I was watching the rats running for their lives. They were shooting off every which way. A couple of dealers came over, the ones always bragging about how bad they are. A rat ran right up one of their legs. The dude screamed, just like women do with a mouse in cartoons, only louder. Shook his leg like his toe was being electrocuted. The rat flew off and dove down a storm drain. I looked at my father. That's when I saw. He hadn't paid the rat any mind, hadn't even turned his head. His eyes were stuck completely on the garden land being uncovered. He had a 2-foot wide smile on his face. My father drove a bus back in Haiti. Here he drives a taxi. That night he drove himself way across town to borrow 2 shovels from a friend of his. The next morning was the first day without school. I was done with 5th grade forever. I planned on sleeping till noon to celebrate, but when it was still half dark, my father shook my shoulder. I would not be very happy if that happened. School was over, but that garden was just starting. We walked down and picked out a place to dig up. The ground was packed so hard, the tip of my shovel bounced off it like a pogo stick. We tried 3 spots till we found one we liked. Then we walked back and forth, picking out broken glass like chickens pecking seeds. After that, we turned the soil. We were always digging up more trash, bolts and screws and pieces of brick. That's how I found the locket. It was shaped like a heart and covered with rust, with a broken chain. I got it open. Inside was this tiny photo of a girl. She was white with a sad-looking face. She had on this hat with flowers on it. I don't know why I kept it instead of tossing it on our trash pile. It seemed like hours and hours before we had the ground finished. We rested a while. Then my father asked if I was ready. I thought he meant ready to plant our seeds. But instead we turned another square of ground. Then another after that. Then 3 more after that. My father hadn't been smiling to himself about some little garden. He'd been thinking about a farm to make money. I'd seen a package of seeds for pole beans and hoped that what would grow. They get so tall that the man in the picture was picking them way at the top of a ladder. But my father said no. He was always asking people in his cab about how to get rich. One of them told him that fancy restaurants paid lots of money for this baby lettuce, smaller than the regular kind, to use in rich folks' salads. The fresher it was, the higher the price. My father planned to pick it and then race it right over in his cab, running red lights if he had to. Lettuce seeds are smaller than sand. I felt embarrassed planting so much ground. No one else's garden was a quarter the size of ours. Suddenly I saw Miss Fleck. I hardly recognized her in jeans. She was the strictest teacher in Ohio. I'd had her for 3rd grade. She pronounced every letter in every word, and expected you to talk the same way. She was tall and even blacker than my father. No slouching in your seat in her class, or any kind of rudeness. The other teachers seemed afraid of her, too. She walked over just when we finished planting. "Well, Virgil," she said, "you seem to have claimed quite a large plantation here." That's just what I was afraid of hearing. I looked away from her, down at our sticks. We put 'em in the ground and run string around 'em, cutting our land into 6 pieces. I don't know why, till my father stepped forward. "Actually, madam, only this very first area here is ours," he said. He had on his biggest smile. He must have remembered her. "The others we have planted at the request of relatives who have no tools or who live too far." "Really now," said Miss Fleck. "Yes, madam," said my father. He pointed at the closest areas of land. "My brother Antoine, my auntie Anne Marie." My eyes opened wide. They both lived in Haiti. I stared at my father, but he just kept smiling. His finger pointed further to the left. "My uncle Philippe, he lived in New York. My wife's father, he died last year. And her sister. My mother didn't have any sisters." I looked at my father's smiling face. I'd never watched an adult lie before. "And what did your extended family of gardeners ask you to plant?" said Miss Fleck. "Lettuce," said my father. "All lettuce." "What a coincidence," she said back. She just stood, then walked over to her own garden. I'm pretty sure that she didn't believe him, but what principal could she send him to? That lettuce was like having a new baby in the family, and I was like its mother. I watered it in the morning if my father was still out driving. It was supposed to come up in 7 days, but it didn't. My father couldn't figure out why. Neither of us knew anything about plants. The wrinkled old man in the straw hat tried to show me something when I poured out the water. He spoke some language, but it sure wasn't English. I didn't get what he was babbling about, till the lettuce finally came up in wavy lines and bunches instead of in straight rows. I'd washed the seeds out of their places. The minute it came up, it started to wilt. It was like a baby, always crying for its milk. I got sick of hauling bottles of water in our shopping cart, like I was some old lady. Then the heat came. The leaves shriveled up. Some turned yellow. That lettuce was dying. My father practically cried, looking at it. He'd stop by in his cab when he could, with 2 5-gallon water containers riding in the back instead of passengers. Then bugs started eating big holes in the plants. I couldn't see anyone buying them from us. My father had promised we'd make enough money to buy me an 18-speed bike. I was counting on it. I'd already told my friends. My father asked all his passengers what to do. His cab was like a library for him. Finally, one of them told him that spring or fall was the time to grow lettuce, that the summer was too hot for it. My father wasn't smiling when he told us. I couldn't believe it. I stomped outside. I could feel that 18 speed slipping away. I was used to seeing kids lying and making mistakes, but not grown-ups. I was mad at my father. Then I felt sorry for him. That night I pulled out the locket. I opened it up and looked at the picture. We'd studied Greek myths in school that year. In our book, the goddess of crops and earth had a sad mouth and flowers around her, just like the girl in the locket. I scraped off the rust with our dish scrubber and shined up that locket as bright as I could get it. Then I opened it up just a crack. Then I whispered, "Save our lettuce," to the girl. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. I really liked how she kind of realized a little bit that though she was really upset with her father because, the seeds didn't come up and she was pretty disappointed, I'd be pretty disappointed too. She spent a lot of work on these seeds, and she and her father worked really hard, even just trying to get the land ready and then planting them and getting the water. They looked after them, and then they didn't come up, and he just didn't think about the season, and he had made a mistake. So I think it's important that we remember that mistakes happen. So even if an adult makes a mistake, like everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I'm sure your teachers are going to make mistakes going into the fall. So just keep that in mind that everybody's going to make mistakes. But like I said, I really want to focus on accomplishment this week. So just think about all the things that you've done so far this summer. So anything that you've done, really focus on just celebrating those little things. What can you tell somebody else? Say, hey, you've done a good job with this. So maybe think of a way that you can kind of congratulate somebody else and say, hey, maybe you haven't noticed, but you're doing a great job. So for you right now, I'm telling you that you're doing a great job because we are on page 36. This is our next chapter, Stay Young. That is page 36 out of our last page, the very last page in the book is page 69. So I want you to make a fraction and then divide 36 divided by 69. That'll tell you what percentage of the book we have done. So remember, you have to move your decimal point over 2 places. That's multiplying it by 100. So you're doing 36 divided by 69 times 100. That'll tell you what percentage of the book we've done. So I hope y'all will be pretty proud of yourselves when you figure that out. And we are pretty close. So I'm really proud of y'all, and I hope that you'll stick it out. So have a great week. I'll see you on Wednesday with another chapter.